Jesus Christ, who was revealed to us in the personality of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia, as King of Kings, Lion of the tribe of Judah, elect of God. I further greet in the name of the 12 tribes of Israel, which was lost and scattered abroad, and now been reformed by our beloved Prophet God of Jamaica in the year 1968, seeking a universal repatriation to Africa. I further greet it through the Orthodox faith. It is a faith not of writs or rites, but a function of the heart. In plain words, to be born again, which is acquired through a mystical incorporation of the unity between man and the Almighty God. I further greet it through the royal house of David, His Imperial Highness Jacob Asawasim Selassie. I want to first welcome the delegates. Our Prime Minister is not yet here. Mr. Beckers, I should have it right, sorry. Mr. Hilary Beckers, as the Vice Chancellor, Professor. Brother Ali Gale, Chairman of the Grenada National Reparations Committee. Chair Sister, Dr. Lowe and Laura Travail. So let us all bow our heads in prayer or lift up your hands to the Almighty God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, Father of our Lord and precious Savior Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that He gave it His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth unto Him shall not perish but have life eternal. Jah. O Lord, our God, thou Most High, thou standest in the heavens, thou sittest at the throne of righteousness and of peace. O heavenly King, the one of peace, the one of joy, the one of life, the one who gives us the strength and energy to walk each and earth every single day. We pray, God, that you continue to protect us and guide us through the struggles of life. I want to wake up the spirit of the ancestors who have struggled for us many, many years ago to keep this struggle on. I pray for the Reparation Committee to continue their good works and to work hard with discipline of honesty, transparency, and accountability. I ask thee in the name of our precious Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Joe! I would now like you to join with me in saying the Lord's Prayer with reverence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from all evil. For that is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Selah. Let the words of our mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Jah, our strength and our Redeemer, who liveth and reigneth in the hearts of man. I will close some reading from the book of Psalm 87. To begin, verse 1. His foundation is the holy mountains. The Lord loveth the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. Glorious things are spoken of thee, O city of God, Selah. I will make mention of Rahab and Babylon to them that know me. Behold, Philistia and Tyre with Ethiopia, this man was born there. And of Zion it shall be said, this and that man was born in her. The heights themselves shall establish her. The Lord shall count, when he writeth up the people, that this man was born there. As well as the singers and players of instruments shall be there. All my springs are in thee. May the Lord continue to bless us and keep us. May his face keep shining before us as we continue the journey of life. Blessings to each and every one who make it today for this great day of a discussion on reparation. I give thanks, blessings.
I will ask you to remain standing, please. The anthem of I was told to hold on 1 second, so I'm holding. Ladies and gentlemen, we remain standing for the national anthem of Grenada. Hail, Grenada, land of ours, we pledge ourselves to thee. Heads, hearts, and hands in unity to reach our destiny. Ever conscious of God, being proud of our heritage, may we with faith and courage aspire, build, advance as one people, one family. God bless our nation. Thank you. You may have your seats. Honorable Deacon Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada, Professor Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies and Chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Senator Peter David, MP for the town of St. George, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Roxy McLeach Hutchinson, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Elvis Moraine, and as we speak, other ministers are joining us. Honorable David Andrew, Minister for Education, and Honorable Gaetan Lacrette, Minister for Health. Mr. Ali Gill, Chairman of the Grenada Reparations Committee, Mr. Earl Bousquet, Chairman of the St. Lucia Reparations Commission, Mr. Dobar Omad, Chairman of the Antigua and Barbuda National Reparations Commission, members of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, Dr. Francis Alexis, QC, Laura Trevelyan and members of the Trevelyan family, the head of site and staff at the University of the West Indies, Grenada, tutors from St. George's University and T.A. Marichaud Community College, students of the T.A. Marichaud Community College, St. Joseph Convent St. George's, Presentation Brothers College, and St. Andrew's Anglican School. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome you to this morning's proceedings. The concept of reparatory justice has been discussed and debated for decades. Today we are gathered to witness history in the making, a bold step taken by the Trevelyan family, a bold step in the recognition of the role their ancestors played in enslavement, a willingness to make an apology and to provide compensation. The Trevelyan family are trendsetters in this regard. We are truly hopeful that other families will follow their lead, not only in Grenada, but in the rest of the region. We welcome you and we thank you for being part of this historic event. It is my honor to invite Mr. Ali Gill, who is the chairman of the Grenada Reparations Committee. Mr. Ali Gill was once Minister of Culture and also in charge of our carnival celebrations in Grenada. Senator Gill is no stranger to history. I think he can boast that he would have taught history at some point in his life. So we welcome our chairman, Mr. Ali Gill, to make remarks.
Honorable Prime Minister, that's my most famous student. And he just reminded me not to forget to say that. Honorable Ministers of Government, I think you will excuse me if I do not single out ministers, because I believe we have all members of cabinet here with us this morning. Your presence here clearly demonstrates the government's support for reparative justice, and I just want to place on record our hearty thank you for taking time off from cabinet duties to be present with us this morning. Permanent secretaries, Professor Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor and Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and indeed, one would say a trailblazer and pioneer with regards to the struggles for reparative justice, Vice Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Sir Dobrin Omad, and Chair of the Antigua Reparations Committee, who has made the effort to be present with us this morning. We want to thank you so much for making that effort. Earl Bousquet, the chairman of the St. Lucia Reparations Committee. Earl would have sojourned for some time here in Grenada during 1979 to 1983, and I believe that this is his first time back for a worthy cause. Earl, thank you for coming. Laura Trevelyan and other members of the family, we appreciate your presence and welcome to Grenada. Hope that you take some time off to visit the beaches, the rivers, waterfalls, experience our national dish, oil down. And when you get back to your various destinations, you can say that Grenada is indeed the best island in the world. Dr. Francis Alexis, King's Counsel, who continues to give free legal advice to the Reparations Committee and continues to be a rock with regards to this reparative justice struggle. I want to especially salute all the Rastafarian brothers and sisters who are present with us this morning. The Rastafarians, for decades, have continued to carry the torch of black consciousness, repatriation, legalization, or decriminalization of the sacrament of the cannabis, and they have continued to hold true to their faith, despite all of the challenges that they have faced throughout history. And we want to especially welcome our Rastafarian brothers and sisters. Comrades and colleagues all, good morning. I greet you standing on the land of the Kalinago people, the first peoples of Camahon Island. This island and its peoples existed long before Columbus sighted it, and ages before the Europeans invaded and plundered this island in the name of European exploration and resource extraction. Plunder, extraction, and genocide, which financed and fueled the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and specifically to build the British Empire. So today, I honor the memory and legacy of the first inhabitants. The Kalinagos we will never forget. For they were among the first of many casualties of European dehumanization, enslavement, and plunder in the Caribbean region. And as we gather here on the land of the Kalinago people, I stand proudly on the shoulders of our African ancestors, the children, women, and men who were forcibly removed from their tribes, their homes, their villages, their countries, their continent, crowded onto ships like cargo, and forced to endure the treacherous, inhumane, and deadly trip across the Atlantic Ocean. A death trap, if you wish. A death trap of disease, death, and despair. For 400 years, human beings were insured as property. Trading human beings for profit was one of the most lucrative trades of that time. The lucrative trade, colleagues, was nothing less than human trafficking, a crime against humanity. We are here today because millions of our African ancestors survived this perilous journey. However, we must never forget the many Africans, our ancestors, that succumbed to the harshness and brutality of human chattel enslavement. Chattel enslavement, of course, being the worst form of human enslavement. And I would be remiss if I did not remember our ancestors who, in an act of defiance, fought back or chose death over subjugation and enslavement by making the floors of the Atlantic Ocean their burial ground. Today is a day of remembrance, a day to remember our ancestors and their descendants. And it is finally a day of recognition of the harms of slavery and a moment of global reckoning, a moment of reckoning that is long overdue. So if you remember anything about today, I hope you remember these 3 points. 1, this apology and financial commitment from Laura Trevelyan and the family should serve as a clarion call to other families, institutions, and governments in Europe to acknowledge their wrongs, apologize, and commit to repairing the harms done by the ancestors. Secondly, governments in the Caribbean region must do more for the struggle for reparative justice and come together using, of course, the CARICOM Reparations Commission as the vehicle through which the battle for reparatory justice is waged and must be won. Further, our governments must consistently and publicly, with one voice, call on European nations to engage in a conversation with their counterparts in the Caribbean region. The result of these conversations must be the creation of a comprehensive social and economic development plan that creates a stronger, sustainable, and thriving Grenada and the Caribbean region. Thirdly, this fight for reparatory justice is our fight. The topic of slavery and reparations should and must be part of our school's curriculum, from primary school through university, because it is only through education rooted in truth about our past, our present, and our future that we will truly liberate ourselves from the lies and falsehoods that we have been taught. This movement for reparatory justice must utilize our education system as a place to achieve true liberation. I call it education for liberation. Colleagues, this is the beginning of a process, or a part of a process, that is undergirded by truth, transparency, and repair. The truth of the matter is that for 400 years, Europeans, including the Trevelyan family, benefited from the inhumane and illegal trafficking of human beings for profit and generational wealth building. Furthermore, as we embark on this important journey together, we must commit to being transparent with each other about our shared vision for justice for our first peoples and our African ancestors. Descendants of enslavers and profiteers of slavery must clearly and fully understand the social, economic, and devastating public health impacts that hundreds of years of economic disinvestment and social neglect have had on individuals and families as well as our nation. And they must address the current social and economic realities of the lingering legacy of concentrated disadvantage manifested as poor quality education, illiteracy, high rates of unemployment, poor health outcomes, and overall stalled national development and nation building. And I do acknowledge the concern of those of you brothers and sisters in our midst who are wondering whether there will ever be a level of financial compensation that can repair what was stolen and lost because of the indigenous genocide, the slave trade and slavery. And maybe not. Maybe there can never be no financial compensation by families, governments, and institutions that have benefited from slavery. However, we say to the families, to the institutions, to the governments, that they must contribute to stop the bleeding of the many wounds caused by indigenous genocide, the slave trade, and slavery. As one people, as one family, we must come together to have honest and principled conversations in our homes, in our churches, our schools, on the football fields, wherever we are. We must gather to talk with each other about what repairing the harms of slavery means for us, for our families, and for the broader Caribbean society. This is a conversation that we must have. As a matter of fact, we, the Grenadian people, must decide what repair should look like, and the engagement continues. The Trevelyan family is setting an example by saying they are sorry for the harms that their family caused to our families. They are opening a door, which we appreciate. We do not expect the Trevelyan family to pay for all the debts of all the British families, for the royal family, for the British government. But we appreciate that the hand that they have now stretched forth to say, listen, my ancestors have sinned, and I am prepared to stretch a hand to help. To the government of Grenada, we have all of them. The government, the cabinet meeting is now at the Trade Center Annex. We say achieving reparatory justice must become a core and central development strategy for this nation. Reparations cannot be seen as a side project. We must invest in and commit to the plans and processes needed to get us on a solid path towards securing what is owed to our ancestors and their descendants. To each and every Grenadian here in Grenada and in the diaspora, we say the legacy of slavery is alive and well, and that this is not a lost cause. This is not something that we should put behind and move on. We must join hearts and hands, and as a strong, proud, and resilient people, demand justice, fight for fairness, and hold those responsible for the plunder, extraction, and exploitation of our nation, and for the inhumane treatment of our ancestors. We must hold them accountable. Hold them accountable for the harms they have done, and for the persistent problems that our people, that our nation have been subjected to. As we continue to embark on this journey for reparative justice, we must not forget that there is a glaring need to reset the soul of the nation, of our nation. A soul that remains scarred by the history of colonialism. It is for this reason that the Grenada National Reparations Committee continues to lobby our government to transform the monumental landscape of our country by renaming our streets, our schools, and other national institutions, renaming them after outstanding Grenadians or even outstanding Caribbean nationals that have contributed significantly to our civilization. No one needs to remind us that almost 50 years of independence, we still see the Royal Grenada Police Force and His Majesty's prison. Mr. Prime Minister, members of Cabinet, we must also engage in a national conversation on the issue of republicanism. A conversation on Grenada becoming a republic and moving away graciously from the English monarchy as head of state must commence in earnest. As Grenadians, we are very aware that on 2 occasions we went to the polls to vote yea or nay for the Caribbean Court of Justice to be our final appellate court. On both occasions, we said nay. This issue of the Caribbean Court of Justice is worth revisiting, for it is not merely a legal issue. It is an issue that goes fundamentally to the ideals of an independent nation, growing, maturing, and defining itself. It forms part of the definition of who we are as a people. It is these issues that will nourish the very ethos of Grenadianism. Colleagues, friends, family, comrades, as I have said before, today is a continuation of a long struggle for justice for our indigenous and African ancestors. And we commit to working hand in hand, governments and individuals, fisher folks, farmers, students, teachers, Rastafarians, public servants, all. Let us never forget, we may not all be perfect, but we are all sacred. It is in remembering the sacredness of our ancestors and descendants as human beings, created in the own image and likeness of God, superior to no one, and certainly not inferior to anyone, worthy of dignity and respect, that we will fight until justice is served. We shall, on this issue of reparative justice, we shall move forward on our feet and not on our knees. The struggle continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles is the Vice-Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. Professor Beckles has had a distinguished career as an academic, international thought leader, United Nations committee official, global public activist in the fields of social justice and minority empowerment. He has lectured extensively in Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia, and has published over 100 peer-reviewed essays in scholarly journals, 12 books on subjects ranging from Atlantic and Caribbean history, gender relations in the Caribbean, sport development, and popular culture. In 2013, he became the chair of the Caribbean Reparations Commission. Under his guidance, the University of the West Indies has established the Caribbean Center for Reparatory Justice. He has served as an associate member of the London University Legacies of Slave Project and the University of Hull Wilberforce Institute of Slavery and Emancipation. He is also a member of the United Nations Development Program Advisory Panel for the Caribbean Human Development Report. Ladies and gentlemen, my Vice Chancellor, Professor Hilary Beckles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our honored and distinguished Prime Minister, my latest best friend. Other distinguished members of the Parliament of Grenada, my colleagues in the Reparations Commission, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and the Grenada National Reparations Commission, our guests, the Trevelyan family, Laura and her family, my UWI colleagues, members and citizens of the Grenada community and society, and I see a lot of school children here this morning. Special welcome to you. I assume you are future UWI students. And, members of the Caribbean world and the world beyond who are with us today via UWTV, which has taken this program throughout the region and across the world. Very good morning, everyone. 15 minutes behind time. Good afternoon, everyone. If you are in Australia, good morning. 500 years ago, something totally unknown to humanity, never seen on planet Earth, erupted from the depth of hell and was brought to the Caribbean. That thing was called chattel slavery. Never before in the history of humanity had such an institution found expression on planet Earth. It was brought to the Caribbean in the first instance as a strategy to exploit enchained African people for the wealth creation of those who possessed a military advantage. Chattel slavery was that institution that defined human beings as non-human property, chattel, and real estate. It was the first time in human history that a people had been so defined and used for such purposes. We know the value and the meaning of property. Property is that thing which you could buy, you could sell, you could mortgage, you could lease, you could rent, you can use as currency. All of those characteristics that we know about property, you can pass it on to your children, you can use it in a transaction. All of those characteristics of property were applied to African people. The British were the first to commit this system to legislation. And as early as 1636, and then later in the slave code, the British slave code, 1661, Africans were deemed to be non-human. It was a system that was built by the entire British and European communities. The royal families endorsed it, invested in it, owned it, legitimized it through their parliaments and royal prerogatives, and it became common culture. It became the common culture, the norm of the British and the Europeans in their empires. It was not only a system of chattel enslavement, it was also a system of genocide. And it was the second Caribbean genocide. We heard of the genocide of the indigenous people of Kalinago, who fought heroically against the invasion of their civilization. But when the Africans were brought in, the genocide continued. You only have to look at the numbers. The British brought 3.5 million Africans into the Caribbean. 3.5 million. At emancipation, there were 600,000 remaining. How do you reduce 3.5 million people down to 600,000? It was the economics of the system. The economics of the system dictated that it was more profitable to buy an African on the auction block, use that African intensively for 7 to 10 years, work that African to death, and replace that African. The expectation, therefore, was the investment, 7 years of wealth extraction, and the replacement of that person. In other words, the economics of the system did not support the concept of an old African. Old age, aging, The system saw that as a cost. It was efficient to buy that youth, 7 to 10 years, replace that person, and so on and so forth. And that is why 3 million people were reduced to 600,000. The Caribbean system was the most brutal social organization known to man. There was nowhere in the world where any people exposed to such a structure. It was indeed unique and historic. We are honored here to be hosting the Trevelyan family in the Spice Isle. The Trevelyan family were leading architects in this system. They were among the greatest beneficiaries of this system. They were among the leading advocates of this system, and Grenada was the place from which their enrichment took place. It's an enrichment that enabled a family to diversify in its professional elitism and to become one of the most sustainable families in Britain. It's a family that at emancipation was in the ownership of just over 1,000 Grenadians, slaves, for which they were compensated at full market value. That wealth from the compensation enabled the family to consolidate and launch its future into today. When I was a history student in Britain, one of the leading and most distinguished historians that dominated the writing and teaching of history was Sir G. Trevelyan, distinguished member of this family that spread its professional competence across multiple areas of British life. This family was a central part of the slavocracy of the world. It's a family that used its formidable intellectual and professional achievements to generate enormous wealth from slavery, and to use that wealth for its own enrichment as well as the promotion of the British economy. The resistance to the slavery and the genocide was everywhere. The African people across the Caribbean fought, ran away, resisted the best they could against this evil. This resistance was also a critical part of their mortality. The British were among the most creative of the Europeans in finding strategies to punish Africans in resistance. I am currently preparing a manuscript for publication entitled 1,000 Ways to Punish Rebellious Africans in the Caribbean. The ones you know are the common ones. You cut off their hands, you cut off their feet, you burn them in oil, you rape the women, you sell the children, you put them in cages. These are the ones you know. These are the ones you probably have seen in movies. But behind that, there were hundreds of methods that were used. Those methods have been so well documented, it is not difficult for us to research them. And it would be remiss of me not to speak of this matter from the perspective of gender. You cannot speak about slavery without speaking specifically about women, the women who were enslaved. Because the experience in slavery of men, black men, was fundamentally different from the experiences of women. And we cannot gloss it over by speaking about slavery. There were two slaveries. Let us look at the women so we understand where we are with this system. The system of chattel slavery was built upon the identity of the woman. The woman was the carrier of the status. The black woman was the carrier of the status of slavery. A child, a black child at birth, took its status from the mother. That was the law. If the mother was white, and if the father was a slave man, that child was born free, because a white woman could not give birth to a slave child. And in our archives, there are dozens and dozens of mixed race babies whose fathers were slave men and their mothers were white. Those babies were born free. The system was designed this way to enable white men to have access to all of the black women they owned, and by raping and impregnating black women, those babies were born slaves, so they could not have a claim on their father's property. You understand the law of this? So the white man protected himself from the claims of his mixed race children by legalizing that those children were born slaves and therefore could not litigate against their father's property. This system was carefully designed and structured. So a black woman, therefore, could not be raped, because you cannot rape property. You cannot rape property. And the black woman was what was called perfect property. Now, what is perfect property? You buy it, you could rent it, lease it, mortgage it, sell it, and you could rape it. all of the characteristics. And importantly, when a black enslaved woman gave birth to a child that was also a slave, when that child reaches the age of 14, 15, that child had replaced the investment cost of the mother. So you go to the harbor, you buy a black woman off the auction block, bring her back to the plantation, you pay 30 pounds for her. Her child reaches 12, 13, the child is now worth 30 pounds. So the mother has replaced her costs. All other children are now what you call perfect investments. All the subsequent babies are revenue streams. It's a revenue stream. You have already got your cost back from the first child. All the other children is now what we call in economics pure profit. Pure profit. So each child was capitalizing the estate. Each child, each year, was adding to the capitalization value of the estate. And this is how the system was designed. The Trevelyan family has risen up 1,000,000 miles to be here with us today. While the Trevelyan families is meeting with us today to speak about this history, to reflect upon this history, next week arriving in Jamaica to continue this conversation, we have invited at the university next week a cohort of 15 African kings and queens, 7 kings and 8 queens, to come to the Caribbean to talk to us about what slavery did to their royal families, how they survived slavery, how they were implicated in some of the legacies of slavery. So today, we are having this conversation with British descendants of enslavers. And next week in Jamaica, this week in Jamaica, we are having that conversation with the other side of the equation. The Africans are coming to the Caribbean. The kings and queens whose societies were ravished by slavery, they're coming here to talk about what slavery meant to their African world. We are in the 7th phase of the reparations movement. From the moment chattel slavery was built in the Caribbean, the resistance started and the reparations movement began. We have looked at the various phases of the reparations movement. In the 1830s, when the Trevelyan family and other families were receiving their reparations, the enslaved people also called upon the British government for their reparations. The 1830s was the beginning of this movement where the emancipated people said, how about us? It's our labor, it's our dignity, our humanity that was stripped from us. We are the ones to receive reparations, not the enslavers. But the enslavers dominated the British Parliament. They were the legislators. So the enslavers raided the British Treasury of 20 million pounds to pay themselves. It was the largest single expenditure ever undertaken by the British Parliament to compensate the slave owners for their lost property. It was 40% of the national expenditure for that year. One act, 40% of the expenditure of a nation paid over to the enslavers. The enslaved received nothing. In fact, when the enslavers asked for their reparations, the British Parliament told them, you should be grateful that we are giving you freedom. Take your freedom and be quiet. That was the posture. And there were many people in the British Parliament, people like Buxton. There were many people in civil society, people like Clarkson, who were saying, to compensate the slave owners is a crime greater than the crime they had already committed. It's a crime to compensate them after they had committed a crime. You do not give a bank robber a reward for his robbery. Why are we compensating the slave owners? It's the enslaved who should be compensated. And that was debated in the British Parliament, and the British Parliament rejected that perspective and compensated the slave owners. So here we are now in another phase of this movement, because we never gave up as a people. We heard reference to the role of the Rastafari. From the moment those Africans returned from Ethiopia, having gone to fought against the fascism of the Italians, and they returned to the Caribbean and began the Rastafari movement, they began to speak about African history, African culture, African dignity, and reparations. So it's been 100 years, 100 years of Rastafari pushing this movement. Yeah. And we know this to be true because we know our history. The slavery had left behind the scars, the reduction in the love of blackness, the diminished respect for Africanness. All of these things were part of that white supremacy system that left many black people ashamed of their Africanness. It was the Rastafari who demanded the restoration of those identities, and quite frankly began to teach us all how to respect who we are and how to fight this legacy. It was an honor for me to meet Laura Trevelyan and to begin a conversation with her about this history. A critical moment was when Laura organized a town hall meeting with her entire family. I think there were over 50 or 60 of them in a Zoom town hall. And I was able to speak with them about the importance of having a family that not only became enriched out of slavery, but within it now has an intellectual class of people. Laura herself is a distinguished communicator. There was Professor Trevelyan. There were all of these people who are now in the intellectual class of Britain. Not just bankers and lawyers, but people who can now speak about this legacy through different eyes. And it was a remarkable discovery to find how Laura herself was prepared to lead her family, hold them by the hand, and lead them to Grenada today. These are developments that are transforming of the world. These are developments that require courage and commitment. To look into your history, your past, and to recognize that a crime has been committed, a crime that has led to your own enrichment and privilege, and to be able to say, this was wrong. It was inhumane. In the emancipation debate in the British Parliament, those who were trying to end slavery argued in the Parliament that slavery was not just a sin within the Christian theology. It was not just immoral in normal social culture, but that it was criminal. It was a criminal system to take a human being, possess their labor as your labor, have that labor without the support of that person, and use that person's labor, which you are stealing from that person, their labor, and taking that labor you have stolen for yourselves and deprive that person of the fruit of their labor. Every human is entitled to the fruit of their labor. That was the argument which was used to say that slavery was a criminal system, and all of those who administer it were involved in criminal activity. But for a family to say, we wish to confront this past, and we wish to use the CARICOM Reparations Commission's framework to guide the conversation, where there is an apology, where there is an acknowledgement of a crime, and where there is a genuine and sincere desire to participate in an act of repair. Acts of repair will always be diversified and controversial, always will be, because there are many who will say, how do you compensate 20 million people for 200 years of unpaid labor? And this is what Sir Arthur Lewis said in his famous book, 1939, Sir Arthur Lewis. And I want to say, Sir Arthur Lewis wrote that book, Labor in the West Indies, when he was 24 years old, in which he argued that Britain had 200 years of free labor from 20 million people in the Caribbean. How do you put a value on that? The value of that is seen in the industrialization of Britain. That's where you see it. When you drive through Birmingham City, Manchester, Liverpool, you drive through the industrial complex of Britain, that is where you see the input of 200 years of free labor from 20 million people. Trillions of pounds of value. But the reparations movement have said that Britain owed the black people of the Caribbean this debt. And we are saying that the only way this Caribbean is going to rise up and find that level of competitiveness in economic reform, economic restructuring, is when Britain acknowledges that it has a debt to the Caribbean and it must work with the governments and the private sector. This is why some of us have committed our lives to this movement. Because we know that the Caribbean is going to flounder in the decades ahead, despite our best efforts. And don't think that we have been sitting around on our laurels waiting for handouts. We're not talking about that. We are saying that when Britain gave these countries their independence, Britain left these countries in a total and complete mess, having extracted the wealth, sucked them dry, and leave them like that. And we are expected to clean up their mess and begin the process of nation building, begin the process of developing our economies, building institutions, health, education, infrastructure. We were told you are on your own. And that is what nation building has meant to us in the Caribbean, that we are on our own, having been the site of wealth extraction. Some of the statistics are terrible. I have looked at Jamaica because it's the largest of our societies. In 1962, they signed off, told Jamaica you can have your independence and go. And 80% of the black people could not read or write. How do you begin to build a nation if 3/4 of your people cannot read or write after you have dominated them for 300 years? And Britain took Jamaica in 1655. And between 1655 and 1962, 3/4 of the black people cannot read or write. And then you give them independence and say, go and develop. Now, I believe that we in the Caribbean have done magnificently to take that mess we inherited and build out stable democracies. We have helped ourselves. We have helped ourselves to achieve what we want to achieve. And I can speak of that from the point of view of the University of the West Indies. The British, we were very grateful, gave us a small grant in 1948 to set up the University of the West Indies. Fine. They gave us a grant to set up a small medical school with 33 students. Small grant, University of the West Indies, 33 medical students. And that's how we started. We were appreciative of that grant. We were appreciative of that start. But look at it now. 55,000 students scattered across the entire Caribbean. 5 campuses ranked in the top 1.5% of the best universities in the world. Now, that is our achievement. The question is, when Britain returns to this region to help to clean up the mess that we are dealing with, how much further this region would advance and how much more quickly it will advance. The reparations movement is a call for partnership. It's a call for partnership. It's a call for diminishing the debt owed to the people of this region. And it's a call to have a shared vision for the future. That is what we are calling for. We're not calling for racial strife. We're not calling for international conflict. We believe reparations is the key for a win-win strategy for both sides of this conversation. And this is why I feel honored to be a part of the welcoming of the Trevelyan's here today. To begin, in a small but powerful way, this journey of conciliation, this journey of partnering, and this journey of having a shared future for everyone. We know the legacy of slavery here in Grenada. We know the legacy. All of us can see it. The poverty, the lack of competitive industries that require technology and science to bring them to a higher level, We know all of those issues, the legacy of colonization. We know that. And this is why we have said whatever resources are made available should go to the children of Grenada who would wish to explore their creative imaginations and be whatever they want to be. I hope that one of them will want to be an historian. But whatever they want to be, to have some resources available to them, to allow them to be who their ancestors would wish them to be, wishes to be upright, dignified, strong black people for the future. That's what we want. Now, I was at a conference in Paris in November, and the French government had said there's a national fuel shortage, so no public building should be heated above 19 degrees. And I'm in this boardroom, and I'm wearing my scarf, my tam, my gloves, my winter jacket, and I'm wrapped up from top to bottom, sitting there freezing to death, discussing UNESCO's business. The chairman of the committee apologized to me for the fact that as a black man I cannot handle the space. And I said to him, Mr. Chairman, we, the black people of this planet, we are the first humans on this planet. And we chose Africa for a reason. We could have chosen to live anywhere on this planet, but we chose Africa for a reason. And this is not it. So we are looking at this matter from the depth of history as a black people who have spread their DNA all over the world. And we want justice, we want equality, and we want respect for the dignity of all peoples. We do not believe in a hierarchical world of white people, brown people, black people. No, no, we believe in a horizontal world. All people, horizontally structured in terms of their living capacity. Reparations is about that horizontal world for all of humanity. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Beckles. I would like you to turn your attention, just to look back for 1 second. We have on display the names of the persons who would have been enslaved on those plantations, 6 plantations. You may have seen it on your way in, but this is our way of showing respect to them and acknowledging them. I now invite Mr. Nigel DeGale to recite a poem for us.
Good day, everybody. I was asked to say a poem, and I heard recite. I cannot remember all those words. So I have my backup on my laptop. Harvest time. The harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. 100 million pounds from the Church of England, 100,000 pounds from Laura Trevelyan. Give her a big hand, please. Thank you. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't want a penny from those who enslaved us. nor a dime from those who enslaved our minds. I say no to reparation. After reaping Africa and the Caribbean, it's time to turn things around. Oh, they can clap for that? I want to be massa. You can be whatever you want. Slave trader, slave owner, missionary, magistrate. I want to live in a great house on top of the hill and watch my white slaves slave for me and be entertained by the white slave driver whipping the behind of my white slaves. And when the night falls, I am going to sample all the white female slaves and make mulattoes. Yes, white cockroaches. All is mine. My property is my property. Clap for that. It is payback time now. And if they try to run away, my drones will locate them and we will recapture them and we will lynch them. Hold on. So you think it is now that I am standing here waiting in line? I've been waiting here for centuries. And now my turn come. You talking nonsense about reparation? So Hillary, it is our time now. So wake up and smell the bush tea. And the white man knew, ain't it, that this day was going to come. He knew it really well. So he concocted this cock and bull story about reparation. Because he's afraid. And she too. They are afraid of I and I and I and I. Ja! Yeah. I am not afraid to take this stage. I am going to take my place in that great house tonight, so that my white slaves will slave for me and make me filthy rich like the Trevelyan's. Retribution chapter 1 verse 1 says, whatever a man soweth, so shall he reap it. As of now, all cruise ships are now slave ships. Hello. I need 1,000 white Britons and 1,000 white Americans of Donald Trump's complexion. No. We are not going to grow sugar cane anymore. Weed, cannabis. We are going to pass the legislation soon. On the 1st of August, my first son, Alim, will take over all the foreign white-owned banks. And this is straight from the Bible, you know. Slaves, obey your masters. And right now, as I speak, our black pope is putting together the final scriptures for the white slave Bible. Clap. Don't look so sad. Because this is what they did to us. When we were kings and queens in Africa, leading in science and technology and philosophy, they enslaved us. When sugar had more value than silver and gold, they killed everybody, and the wheat we sold was captured in Africa through the worst forms of brutality, and waiting in barracoons near by the sea, was waiting for the slave ship to come for we, was waiting to die on that perilous journey. Oh God, she still a bother me. Oh God, she still a hunt me. Oh God, she still torment me. This thing called slavery. Was waking up early to answer my name and working all day, chopping down sugar cane. Was waking up early to answer my name, walking through hurricane. bother me. Oh God, she still a hunt me. Oh God, she still torment me. This thing called slavery. And all our try to get it from my brain. Is it causing me problems? Is it causing me pain? Some say it gone already, but I keep coming back again, disguising itself under a brand new name. Oh God, she still a bother me. Oh God, she still a haunt me. Oh God, she still torment me. This thing called chattel slavery. And for 400 years, they enslaved us. So, for the next 400 years, it is time and our time to rule the land and the waves. All those in favor say aye. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Mr. DeGale for his thought-provoking poem. Thank you. I now invite Laura Trevelyan to the podium. Laura has been a journalist for the last 30 years, and she is here with her family to make a formal apology on behalf of her family. Laura.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you to everyone who's here today. Thank you to Nigel for that incredible poem, which I don't really know how to follow that. I want to thank the Prime Minister of Grenada and the Cabinet for coming here today. I want to thank the next generation, the school children who are here today. And I'm so sorry about our painful shared past and for the role of our ancestors in it. And I just want to say how incredibly moved and horrified all of us have been by the exhibit at the back, which shows the names of the enslaved at the time that compensation was paid to our families. It's the names of the enslaved on those estates in which our family had shares. And to see the names and the ages and to think of the horror that those people endured in the not-so-distant past and to think of our role in it is shameful. And that is why we're here today. I want to thank Sir Hilary Beckles for his incredible leadership, for guiding our family through what has been a difficult process, for persuading people that it's important to stand up and be counted and to come here to Grenada and confront what our ancestors did to yours. I want to thank Nicole Phillip Dow for answering my email in January of last year, when with great trepidation I wrote to her and said, Nicole, I'd like to talk to you about my family's history as slave owners on Grenada. And I didn't know how Nicole would reply, but she replied, and electronically she said, Laura, I have a smile on my face. And then I knew that it would be all right, that it was okay to take this leap of faith. And that Nicole and Sir Hilary and Arlie Gill, I want to thank everyone who has guided us through this. D.C. Campbell, the Grenadian historical novelist, and his wife Susie. Edwin Frank, who drove us around the island and educated us on the history. To everyone who has been part of this journey, which is just beginning now to go forward, I just want to say this is a first step. We hope, as Sir Hilary said, this is the beginning of something. We can't begin to say that an apology is the end of the process, and we have no idea where this will lead, but I just want to say that I've been encouraged by the number of other British families in the British Caribbean, in Jamaica, for example, who have privately written to me and said, Laura, what your family has done is something that we have talked about doing for years, but we had no idea how to do it. We want to know what your roadmap was. Well, the roadmap began here in Grenada with Nicole Philip Dow, Ali Gill, with Sir Hilary. And so, without further ado, thank you all for your patience. I just want to say that this process began for us really when University College London published their Legacies of British Slave Ownership. Until then, we didn't know that the Trevelyan family had these interests in Grenada, but when UCL put that database online, family members who are here today typed in the name Trevelyan into the database, the records of compensation paid to slave owners when slavery was abolished, and to their horror, people here today, family members, saw the name Trevelyan come up in relation to Grenada. And so John Dower and my uncle Humphrey, both of whom are here today, were so horrified by this that they began to email family members and say, and me, who I've only, by the way, just met him last night on Grenada, because we're from different branches of the family. John emailed me and said, Laura, what do you think about this? And I said, I think it's too horrifying. I don't even know what I think. It's too difficult to even contemplate. So it sat there at the back of my mind until George Floyd's death in the United States, and I'm an American citizen, I live in New York. And then I realized that I couldn't just file it away into the category of too difficult any longer. And so Nicole answered my email. I came here to make the BBC documentary, Grenada Confronting the Past. John Dower started convening family members on Zoom. Sir Hilary spoke to our family, and we have got to this point. So without further ado, I would like to invite my cousin John Dower to come up here so that we can read to you our letter of apology, which has been written by committee. And I know that when things are written by committee, perhaps that doesn't always work, but I hope that this does work, and I want to pay tribute to my uncle Tom Trevelyan, who's a GP, who took hold of the letter and said, as a general practitioner, it's all about how you communicate with people. And so I want to now read this letter with John to you, and then we're going to invite family members up here to sign it in your presence, and we're going to give it to the Prime Minister of Grenada, and we hope that this is the beginning, not just for Grenada, but for the Caribbean, because of all that you have endured. To the people of Grenada, we, the undersigned, write to apologize for the actions of our ancestors in holding your ancestors in slavery on estates which included Tempe, Simon, Requin, La Sagesse, Beauséjour, Soubise, Crochou, Grand Bras, St. Cloud and Chantilly, part owned by Louisa Simond and Sir John Trevelyan, 4th Baronet of Nettlecombe and Wallington, and later their children in the 18th and 19th centuries.
Slavery was and is a crime against humanity. Its damaging effects continue to the present day. We repudiate our ancestors' involvement in it.
We apologize to the surviving descendants of the enslaved on those estates for the continuing impact on their daily lives, their health, and their well-being. We are grateful to the Centre for the Studies of the Legacies of British Slavery at University College London for publishing the results of their research based on the records of financial compensation paid by the British government to British plantation owners.
We urge the British government to enter into meaningful negotiations with the governments of the Caribbean in order to make appropriate reparations through CARICOM and bodies such as the Grenada National Reparations Commission.
After consulting with the Grenada National Reparations Commission, Laura Trevelyan, which is me, is making a donation of £100,000 to establish an education fund at the University of the West Indies Open Campus here in Grenada. Details of that fund will be determined by the GNRC in collaboration with the UWI and the Government of Grenada.
Other Trevelyan family members are donating money towards bursaries for the UWI Grenada Open Campus Initiative and supporting the Grenada Education and Development Programme, GRENED. Family members also wish to offer their time to ongoing projects in Grenada. This letter has been signed by 104 of the descendants of the part owners of these plantations, 7 of whom are here with us, and I'm going to call them up to come and sign this letter in your presence. So there's myself and Laura, Humphrey Trevelyan, Peter Trevelyan, Tom Trevelyan, George Trevelyan, and Alex Dower. And I understand, Tom, you have the master copy.
Raise your pen. Squeeze in there. Yeah, squeeze in.
We would like to present this letter to the Prime Minister of Grenada, Dickon Mitchell, MP.
Honorable Deacon Mitchell is the 9th Prime Minister of Grenada. He began his service to Grenada as a teacher at his alma mater, Presentation Brothers College. He pursued his law degree at the UWI and at Hewardin Law School, and distinguished himself as a lawyer at Grant, Joseph & Co., and at Mitchell & Co. In June of 2022, after only 8 short months into his political career, he led his party to victory. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister.
I want you folks to play these 3 games from the NLA. Daily pick 3 cash flow and play with. You will be supporting sports and culture, nation building and our future. So go out and play, folks, make it a must. You will see what the National Lottery is doing for us. When you play pick 3 cash flow and play with, the NLA will support you all the way.
Starting September 30th, Monday to Friday, these 3 games will be drawn mid-morning, 9:45 a.m., midday, 12:45 p.m., and evenings, 7:45 p.m. The National Lotteries, supporting sports, culture, and nation building.
Sunday money.
Good afternoon, viewers and listeners. Welcome to the National Lotteries Authority's Daily Pick 3 Midday Draw for today, Monday, February 27th, 2023. I am Anisha Charles. With me this afternoon is Ms. Giselle Alexander from PKF Accountants and Business Advisors, whose purpose is to ensure that this show is conducted in an accountable manner and the game balls with industry standards and in a way tampered with. This time, show tickets at hand. It's Daily Pick 3. Peace to play. Good luck.